Welcome to Disrupting Japan, straight talk from Japan's most successful entrepreneurs. I'm Tim Romero, and thanks for joining me. Today, we're going to talk about agriculture startups in Japan. You know, it's interesting. With Japan's high food prices, the financial support for farmers, and the strong system of university agricultural research, I've always been a bit surprised that we don't see more AgTech startups in Japan. Well, today's conversation goes a long way to explaining exactly why that is. It's both fascinating and a little frustrating. Today we sit down with Shunsuke Tsuboi of Sagri, who is using satellite imaging and AI to help small-scale farmers. Some in Japan, but mostly in the developing world. Shunsuke explains the challenges of launching a startup from universities without specific startup support, why going global often has nothing to do with the US or Europe, and why the world is a better place when there are tens of millions of small family farms in it, and why those are worth preserving. But you know, Shunsuke tells that story much better than I can. So let's get right to the interview. I'm sitting here with Shun Tsuboi of Sagri, who is using satellites and artificial intelligence to solve agricultural problems. So thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for this time.
It's great to have you. And I mean, agriculture tech, AgTech is something it's interesting in Japan and people don't talk about it enough. So I'm really glad you're on the show. So can you explain a little bit more about what Sagri does? What is the service you're offering?
Sagri company is based in Japan and India. So we are using satellite data to checking each of the farmland. And also for the farmers, we can using satellite data for smart farming, such as when is the best harvesting time, and also which is a good soil situation, we can check it.
The soil analysis, is that done by satellite, or do you have people on the
using
ground
satellite,
checking?
yes.
Really?
Yeah, around 1,000 farmland, checking just the 10 farmland detail, we can spreading the satellite information.
So from satellite imaging, you can tell soil composition, you can tell farmers when the ideal time to apply pesticides, when to harvest. How do your customers interact with this? Is there a smartphone app? How does it work?
So using satellite data checking and through the application, they can connect it that mechanical. So this machine is automatically do that.
So the machines would automatically apply fertilizer?
Fertilizer, yes, this is more needed. All of the farmland can check through the satellite data.
Tell me about your customers. Who's using this? Is this small family farms? Is this large industrial farms? Who are your customers?
So now is mainly is up to 10 hectare is the target.
Okay, so still very small.
Oh yeah, so in Japan is most of the farmers is very small. So they can get easily through the satellite data. So in United States and the European is a more big farmer. So this is not our target.
Interesting. I want to really dig into all of the different use cases and the things you're exploring in a minute. But before we get there, I want to back up a bit and talk a bit about you. So you're currently still a grad student at Yokohama National University, and you started Sagri a few years ago. So is this something you're doing with the university or something on the side?
Startup is 3 years ago we started. So I'm a space technology belong to in my laboratory. This one is connected to our business. My laboratory doing the soil situation and mechanical situation using satellite data. So making the company. Some cases we are using this technology, but otherwise we are running ourselves and mix it, do that. Our CTO is other university professor, so like a collaboration as a technology and combined making the business.
It's funny when we talk about university startups in Japan, Todai and Keio seem to get all the attention.
Yeah.
So what kind of support did you get from Yokohama National University?
Two things. I am a mechanical engineering. Entering the university, I have get a chance to join the laboratory more faster. And the second thing is business issue. To go to the Silicon Valley and the Boston can get the chance to me. So these two things Yokohama National University supported to me.
But not much in terms of fundraising support or...
It is so weak compared to Tokyo University or Keio University.
Yeah, those two universities, they have their own venture funds, so it's hard to compare.
Our university don't have it.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I guess that's good for a founder. It forces you to be more resourceful. And but I noticed as you've launched, you guys have done a lot of pitch contests, and has that been really useful for business development?
So the first year, the second year, at first we don't have the chance. That's the reason we are pitching the many contests, so such as the Singularity University and Silicon Valley 500 acceleration program. Through this, we get the chance. So nowadays, governments and some big company understand our technology, so using.
Pitch contests are really interesting. It is there's so many of them now.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to know, like sometimes they seem like really valuable, sometimes they seem like a real waste of time. But you guys have generated real business from these pitch contests.
Yeah. At firstly, like a VC and the company people can imagine the world like few years later, but we can. So pitch contests value is like pitching and win the contest, so they can understand this technology will happen to the future. So they think they want to hear from us. So business chances often happen. But a few times I win, now I can do that. Because the many years business chances are coming.
Okay, so that's good. You sort of graduated.
Yeah. So but the first year, second year is needed. Now it's the third year. So I'm choosing about the pitch contest. This one is needed to apply, but this one is okay.
What's your advice for other founders in terms of pitch contests? Is it something you should do early on and then just graduate, go into a new phase?
Now is a graduate phase. This year, we are already finishing the venture capital funding. So we want to spread the business more.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And actually, let's talk about some of the different business models you're exploring and the different kind of customers you have. One of the things on your website that you're talking about is your work with Japanese governments to identify abandoned agricultural land.
Yeah.
Why is that important? Why do they want to do that?
Yeah, because most of the cities in Japan, every year by manual checking, all of the farmland. Around 30 million farmland is existed. So we can using satellite data.
So currently they have dedicated staff looking at satellite photos? Or they have dedicated staff driving around to different...
They are driving and checking by manual each of the farmland.
Oh, okay. Well...
But we can getting the satellite data and the AI that's simulating. So this farmland is abundant. This farmland is not abundant.
And why is that important? Is it like taxed differently?
Yes, about tax. Abundant farmland are not abundant. It's a different tax. And also, most of the farmlands is abundant recently because most of the farmers is getting older and older. That is the reason, yeah. Abundant farm percentage is more higher. So every year, mass checking.
That's one of those things. It seems like an interesting use of the technology, but it doesn't seem like a scalable business. I mean, how much demand is there for that kind of analysis?
Yeah, so now this thing is around 1,700 cities is doing every year. Around the maximum is around 1.5 billion yen. So it is a so small market, but the next department checking what kind of the foods, like rice or wheat, they are checking by manual also. These situation also we can change.
That makes sense. So there is some room to grow by expanding the functionality within the different cities and prefectures.
This technology, not only Japan, can spread the global. So we are making this technology in Japan, but spread this technology to East Asia and India.
Yes, actually, and what you're doing in India, I think, is particularly interesting.
So 2 years ago, so we are making the company in India, Bengaluru. In the mainly business is the microfinance. So most of the Indian farmer is needed the lending money, but they don't have the chance because so many farmers existed. So bank cannot spreading their business. So they want to show their trust information immediately, but the bank cannot get now. So we can using satellite data and checking all of the farmers' farmland.
Are you showing the banks that they really are farming it, or are you using the analysis to say that, no, this is very high quality farmland and we're expecting this kind of a yield from it? What's the information you're sharing with the banks?
So at firstly, we are checking the farmland situation, what kind of the foods is planting, and which area they having. So we are calculated, this one is a trust information for banker. So banker using this information and lending them the money. And they can get the money, they can buy the fertilizer and the pesticide. So we are using the data from satellite. They getting the more yield.
Now that's really interesting, because I think like Indian farmers are as well. It's a lot like Japan. There's lots of small farmers, and you're providing this third-party, trusted, scalable source of information, saying, yeah, you can reasonably expect this much wheat to be coming out of this field, and probably around this much rice to be coming out of this other one.
Yeah, that's right. At first, most of the Indian farmers not invest at first. If they're lending the money, they can do that.
So is it also used for like farmers who might want to change crops? Say instead of growing rice, they're growing soy, or they're is it something you could say, hey, well, if you want to try this crop, this would be effective for you? Or
finally, yes, this one can do that. So this situation, so we can suggest it. So this is the final goal. Export and import. So using this all of the information, rice is so many farmers that do that, but the wheat is small. So this is maybe more high value next year. So we can suggest.
I think it's really interesting that when we look at things like AgTech or say FinTech, if we look at what's happening in Japan or the US or Europe, I mean, there are some innovative solutions, like what you're doing. Satellites is definitely helpful and innovative, but it's already pretty good here, right? It's in developed markets, there's a chance to make like small incremental improvements. Things are a little better. But in developing markets, like the Indian market, you're saying there are like these big problems that you could provide huge opportunities, huge advancements. And so are you looking to expand into more of the developing markets, into like Southeast Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa?
Yeah, so Africa is the next market, I think. But now is a so small market. So like around Kenya, around the same about the Guma prefecture. This is a scale. It is so small.
But it would seem that the technology itself would scale incredibly well. It's satellite imaging and AI technology. So you might have, Kenya itself might be a small market, but this is something all through Sub-Saharan Africa you could deploy.
This business is started in Rwanda. So we can see the Rwanda farmers. So this is a starting point. in 2016. So at lastly, we want to expand to Africa area. So using now is satellite data is a free satellite. This is a government issue. This is the resolution is 10 meter. Can using the African farmland. It is some kind of a big chance.
So yeah, I guess in a lot of those farms, just like the Indian and the Japanese farms, are very small patches of land. But 10-meter resolution, like commercially available satellites, we're getting much higher resolution than that now.
Yeah.
And much more frequent updates. So how does that change things?
So now most of the things we are using the Planet DAB. So this one is around the resolution is a 3 meter, cost is a low, and expands all of the farmland. That is the reason we are using. But the more high resolution is around the worldwide view, around 30 centimeter. But it is expensive. So each of the target, we are thinking about this target is using about this resolution satellite.
How often do these images need to be updated? If you're projecting yields, I'd imagine at least like once a week?
Planet DAB is every day. Every day can pass Japan and East Asia, India.
And does your analysis and predictions change daily?
Yes, analysis is daily. So we can getting this information and calculate it and connect it to the mapping, like a Google map.
How much change is there in the predictions from day to day?
Growing crops can changing every day, but mostly the thing they need is when is the best fertilization time.
I also heard you're doing some work with palm oil plantation in Indonesia, right? Because that's obviously a very different type of business model when you're dealing with industrial production. Are you planning on kind of pursuing both angles, or are you more focused on the small microfinance business model?
In the Indonesia is both of that in microfinance also. So one sector is a soil situation, and the second one is about the disease. So if some tree is a disease happen, other tree also spreading. So this palm oil tree needed cutting.
Okay. One of the things that it's fascinating because the technology is really cool. It is this amazing tool that can be applied in a lot of different situations. But in terms of like the business model, are you deciding that we're going to focus this on developing a microfinance verification and risk management infrastructure, or we're going to focus on developing relationships into industrial scale agriculture? Have you decided like which direction you're going to go, or are you going to go in one direction?
In East Asia is from the government, technology is spreading. In Japan also. But in India is the government is the moving speed is slowly. That is the reason we are connected to the company and the FPO. So through this sector, we can spread the technology for farmers.
So if you look forward 5 years in the future, 10 years in the future, what line of business, what area do you think is going to be the biggest part of your business and also making like the biggest impact?
5 years later, we are maybe already go to the African market already. So maybe East Asia in Japan through the government. So digital transformation is already happen. So now in Japan is changing in 3 years. This government platform, we can connect it to our technology.
Is your go-to-market mostly working with governments in different countries? So for example, in India, is it a project with the governments or more with banking and lending institutions?
Japan and East Asia now is contact with the government and doing the project. So this area can spread from the government's situation. But India case is differently. India is like a JA, so FPO. This sector is farmers is connected, making the group. So through this group, spreading the technology. So this FPO is around 4,000 is existed in India.
So getting back to the global expansion plan. So it seems like when we look at like all the potential in different countries, Africa, Southeast Asia, India, the needs of the farmers and the needs of the banking system seem quite similar. You're addressing the same need, but your partnership strategy and your way into the market seems to be really different for each country.
Yeah, that's right.
Does that make things difficult, or is that just sort of the way it is and it's fine?
So difficult. So like each country having the embassy of Japan, and METI people is staying each countries, so we can getting the about the situation hearing from them, and also local company they can connect it to us. Like in Japan, no need for the microfinance because the JA is like a big bank, so farmers can get easily. So we must to make the business each countries, but the same technology can spread.
Though I guess that does make sense because, I mean, agriculture is kind of a special market. It's not like normal goods. Every country it is heavily regulated. There's huge government involvement. So yeah, I guess you sort of have to go in with some kind of a government partnership.
Yeah.
Let's talk a bit about Japan. There's not a lot of agriculture tech startups in Japan. And it seems like there should be. There's lots of potential. There's money to invest. There's lots of small farmers. There's a lot of creative people at universities working on this. Why don't we see more AgTech startups?
Because Japanese venture capital only sees the Japan farmland. It is so minimum compared to the other countries. Now is scaling like a smart farming, but its speed is low. Most of this industry, government pay for that. So farmers want to get like a drone and a smart farming machine, but the half of cost government pay for that.
That makes sense. So the government or the VCs see this as low growth.
We cannot see the growing market, especially the East Asia and India. Some VC like a Beyond Next Venture go to the Indian market, but it is so small. African market also the same thing. Most of the VCs can see the Silicon Valley and the European. So, but a lot of startup of AgriTech is existed.
Yeah, and that's it gets back to what we were saying before. It's like there are real problems to solve in some of these other markets, in the more developing markets. There are much bigger problems, which means much bigger opportunities. And so the VCs you've talked to, now that you can say, hey, no, this is not a Japan startup. We're solving global problems. Were they more interested after that, or are they still not so interested in AgriTech?
So this is a so different situation. Most of the VC cannot understand. So United States and the European is a so big farmland. But in Japan, so it is so small farmland. East Asia and India also the same situation.
Yeah, but this is, that's just so frustrating because that is the exact reason why Japanese startups have a chance to lead in this area.
Yes, that's right.
All the Silicon Valley startups are focused on this industrial scale, automated, large-scale farming, where most of the world doesn't work like that.
So from the Japan technology spreading the East Asia and India, this target for the small farmland, this is a big market, I think.
I think so. And I think, I think it'd be better for like everyone if there's a way for small farmers to compete and survive and still exist as small scale farmers. I don't think it'd be a good thing if the whole world turns into industrial farms.
Yeah. That's right.
Well, listen, Shun, before we wrap up, I want to ask you what I call my magic wand question. And that is, if I gave you a magic wand and I told you could change one thing about Japan, anything at all, the education system, the way people think about risk, the way people think about domestic and export markets, anything at all, to make things better for startups and innovation in Japan.
Absolutely, the education. So
Would
education, yes. Through the education, we are so weak, like me. So most of the people cannot speak English, and also most of the people is a negative mind, so shy. So, but compared to the United States, everyone is raise a hand, like some question.
What you just said covers like a lot of ground. So when you're talking about education, what should change? Is it just more English or more self-confidence?
English also is a good way, and also the ICT and entrepreneurship mind is needed in Japan. Compared to the other countries, making the startup percentage is so few.
But how do we do that? Teaching entrepreneurship, how do you teach that kind of startup mind?
This one is a collaborating is like entrepreneur inside the junior high and the elementary. Because the elementary and junior high, the teacher is like can see the social situation. Inside the university, some guys is doing the internship, can see about the social situation like that.
So it's just the high schools, the university, they're like their own little world. They don't look out into real society?
Yes, like that. So they cannot see the real situation in the social. So inside the school, they understand some kind of the...
That's interesting, but that's hard to change because I've noticed even in universities, and actually though in universities, this has changed a lot in the last 10, 20 years. Like a lot of computer science professors have never written a program for a customer. There's a lot of professors who have never done the thing they're teaching. They're experts in the history of the subject and the teaching of it, but not in the doing of it.
Yeah, so this is a problem. In elementary school, if something is a trouble, they can solve it on self. But adult is this stage is the maximum for the elementary school students.
That's an interesting thing. Just in like a general trend, like getting people to think more of like direct action instead of like kind of an abstract situation, more like hands-on. And that's something like elementary school kids understand. Actually, that's something elementary school kids are really good at. That's like the only thing they understand.
Yeah.
What about your experience in working with the agriculture sciences sections? Were your professors, did they have experience in actual agriculture, or was their background mostly the science and research end?
Most of the professor is like writing like a paper. That is the reasons they can getting the more money from the government. So, but using this technology on the field, they can't do that. That is the reason these technologies are after 20 years later, so appearing. So he think this one is not good. So that is the reason he's staying in university, also joining the startup. How to use this technology on the field, like connected our company, so we can spread this technology.
Well, and it gets back to being like hands-on, right?
Yeah.
Doing it himself.
Yes.
So I guess it is changing a little bit anyway.
Yes, that's what I think so. So, but this professor is so few. Most of the professor is focus on their research and making the paper.
But, somebody's got to start, right? It's like the first penguin.
Yeah. So like Tokyo University and KO and Waseda, it's like this situation changing. But our professor is Gifu University. This is a local university, is the same as Yokohama National University. So not moving, most of the professor.
So we still have a little way to go before that change trickles out to the rest of Japan. Well, listen, Shun, thank you so much for sitting down with me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm so happy to talk with you.
And we're back. Sagri is a great example of a Japanese startup that can make a much bigger impact and a much bigger profit outside of Japan. As Shunsuke discovered, there's certainly room for incremental innovation in Japan. Governments and farmers are both open to using new technology that lets them do the same job a little bit faster. But in India, Southeast Asia, and Sub-Saharan Africa, well, things are different. In those places, there are big problems to solve, and people who are willing to try radical new approaches to solving them. And Sagri's technology could easily scale to help tens of millions of family farmers around the world. But the reluctance of Japanese VCs to invest in companies like this is a little frustrating. Well, okay, it's a little frustrating for me as an observer, but I'm sure it's very frustrating for Shunsuke as a founder. It's a little frustrating to watch Japanese VCs pass on an AgTech business model like Sagri's because it's so different from the successful AgTech models in the U.S. But it is precisely because Japan's farming industry is not large-scale industrial, but small-scale family-run, and thus, in some ways, similar to those in developing nations. This difference is the very reason there is an opportunity for massive global growth in the first place. This is a genuine structural advantage for Japanese startups, and those are, quite frankly, pretty rare. Of course, it's not a simple path. As Shunsuke explained, agriculture is highly regulated everywhere. Market entry requires cooperation of both Japanese and target governments. So Sagri's growth curve is going to be a lot slower than what we would expect from a B2B SaaS or a gaming startup. But eventually, step by step, the value they're adding is going to be clear to everyone. Sagri can help millions of small family farms thrive as small family farms. And they can make a fortune for themselves and their investors in the process. If you want to talk more about AgTech or farming in Japan, Shunsuke and I would love to hear from you. So come by disruptingjapan.com/show180 and let's talk about it. If you leave a comment, I guarantee Shunsuke or I, or maybe both, will respond. And hey, if you get the chance, please leave a review on iTunes or your podcast platform of choice. Or even better, if you like the show, tell a few friends about it. But most of all, thanks for listening. And thank you for letting people interested in Japanese startups know about the show. I'm Tim Romero, and thanks for listening to Disrupting Japan.